Welcome back, Dragon Ballers, to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
And your host on the right, Brock.
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. In this episode, we're talking about Dragon Ball episode 61, Korin Tower. So if you've been keeping up, we're nearing the end of the Red Ribbon Army saga. So hoping you guys are enjoying that. I don't think we have any housekeeping stuff to get into at all, besides the fact that we've decided we're going to do the movies at some point. Maybe as a live stream event, something like that.
Yeah, maybe some bonus content if we ever put up a Patreon too.
But
Seems like
anyway,
a nice side thing to work on.
if it's your first time here, please subscribe, give us a comment if whatever you hear, if you like it, if you don't like it, any of that stuff. Just want to front load some of that this time. I don't think we ever really call for subscribers in the beginning, but
No,
we are now. We're starting to learn the meta or something.
it's how it works.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing that we have, and oh man, wait. Oh, that'll work, yeah. So previously in episode 59 and 60, kind of in between those two, Tao has arrived. Tao Pai Pai has arrived, and his instantiation of the malice that Red has employed, right, is here in this sacred land. He murders Bora, and he fights with Goku. Goku leapt to attack Tao, but found him to be far too quick to even lay a finger on him. In fact, he does, like we said last episode, try to grab his feet, and he can't even grab a single part of him. Meaning, right, that at this point, the heroic spirit, uncharged with the responsibility given to it from the ancestral spirit, is unable to manifest the pinning down of the malice spirit.
He can't get a grasp on it, right?
Yeah. And that's the idea that we see visually represented. So then, Goku, being pretty desperate in this situation, uses the Kamehameha wave. And Tao blocks it, only having his clothing destroyed, and responds with his own Dodonpa, which is a Dodon Ray. And he destroys the turtle hermit symbol on Goku's clothing, knocking him unconscious and believing him to be dead. Tao takes his backpack with 3 of the Dragon Balls and flies away on that pillar that he arrived on. So Goku, having been protected by the 4-star ball, we find out later, as a Red Ribbon soldier comes to collect it, he awakes and proclaims that he would gather the Dragon Balls to revive Bora. And he actually says, "I'll revive your father," right? And it's almost
he
like
he stares at the Dragon Ball and he sees a little yin yang symbol in the Dragon Ball, right? It actually looks like a yin yang symbol. He stares into it and then he says, "I'm going to gather the Dragon Balls and revive your father."
And that's to say that motivating force behind the heroic spirit defeating death, right? And that is something that we're going to see. This is now Goku's, and this is why the Red Ribbon Army arc and the following arc are so important, because this is Goku's ability to defeat death. And there's more to talk about whenever we get to that point at the end, because there's a lot of criticism with Dragon Ball about how death doesn't mean anything, which is not true at all.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it without saying exactly where we're about to go with the story, right? And how it's going to just keep escalating from there.
Right. And so we see Goku stare, and I love how it's not the square, it's not perfectly set, as in the Dragon Ball's not perfectly set in Goku's eye to be a square, but it's more of an X, and it's more of that axis.
Right. It's to say X marks the spot, or you are here.
And here is the place where you have to decide, or where the spirit calls forth. And that's that call to adventure that Goku has, the serious call to adventure.
The original call to adventure.
That can transform the heroic spirit, right, into something legendary. And so this is Goku's first steps on that. Like, his battles with White and Blue have not been the same magnitude because they haven't strengthened his spirit in that way. It's really just been Goku's heroic spirit being measured up against thuggery and disgust
Things that are by default beneath the heroic spirit.
in some way. Yeah, definitely. And so here it's something that's not. It's something that and malice is that which does. And think about our video about Spider-Man, right? It's the same reason why the Green Goblin is the main villain of that
Right.
because that
Because
is
it's
malice.
against being itself.
Yep. So, Goku promises to revive Bora. Upa then recommends that Goku climb the tower to become strong enough to defeat Tao because Goku reasons that Tao will surely come back when he realizes that he doesn't have all the Dragon Balls.
Right. And he also warns Upa you should probably hide because he'll be coming back looking for it before he starts climbing the tower.
Yes. And Upa agrees, and that's pretty much I think where we are. After Goku makes his ascent, that's kind of where the recap ends.
Right. And so this episode kicks off right whenever he arrives at the top of the tower.
Does it? So quick.
Yep.
Yeah. See, there's not a lot of filler in Dragon Ball. I want to say after we got through most of it there with like Arale and stuff. What is happening? There we go. So, arriving at the entrance to Korin's tower, Goku finds himself in a room with 3 large pots of water. When he gazes into the first one, Goku sees Bulma cooking with Krillin in the present at Kame House,
Right.
meaning Bulma still hasn't gone back home.
She's still actually staying there at the Kame house.
Yes. In the second, he sees his past when he saw Chi Chi when he was resting at the apple tree and she was picking flowers for the wedding.
Mm-hmm.
That was at the very beginning of the saga, right? Then, in the third, a large centipede springs forth when he looks into it and wraps around him. His Dragon Ball floats in the air as he has visions of his friends, and then Tao, Bora, and Upa, followed by a foreboding vision of the future, Baba, and a masked mystery man.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, the centipede is gone, and Goku wonders aloud, and a mysterious voice tells him that it was his 3 worlds, past, present, and future. So this is huge. Like this whole thing, there's a
What
lot
a
to this.
dense scene, right?
It's so dense, yes, because those 3 pots, I mean, not only do they represent that, but that the reason he sees what he sees is because that's what's going to propel him into the next step of his journey.
And I think it's tied to a responsibility, right? Because Goku's understanding of his own responsibility that he has is pretty limited as he's, you could say, in the phase of playing games, right? And considering his fights to be games. His only real responsibility, it seems, is to himself and to the spirit of his grandfather to become stronger. And so when he looks into the past, it's interesting that it immediately goes to Chi Chi, right? Where
Well, do you not want to start with Bulma first?
we can talk about Bulma first.
No, just
I was kind
you
of
go
just
in
thinking
order.
chronologically in this weird past, present, future
Oh, I was thinking
sort of.
chronologically in which he sees them, but sure, go ahead. Either
Well,
way.
I kind of wanted to say just for Chi Chi how that responsibility arrives because it's like he promises that he'll marry Chi Chi without understanding that he's done it, right? And so he has this connection in his identity outside of himself there in his past. And that's sort of,
It's
he's
almost funny.
extrapolating himself out
I
there. And
mean,
it's an
think about
important
this idea
moment.
though. Think about this idea that it's almost the reverse because he sees Chi Chi because that's the future, and Gohan's actually in the past,
Hmm.
right? It's kind of interesting
It's
that
like
way
to
that.
go forward, you must go back, right?
And so yeah, seeing Chi Chi is that responsibility of the propagation of the human spirit, let's say, that is combined and upheld by both the masculine and the feminine when they come in joining in a divine sense.
Right, like a primordial responsibility to yourself whenever you become aware of your ability to, or not even your ability, but the otherness, right? Because that's what Goku does whenever he meets Chi Chi, is he tests for her otherness, right? If she's
Well,
different,
I
and
mean,
then to
in this
marry to
one,
that,
this
marry
is
the
when they
two.
start talking about getting married
Mm-hmm.
again, is in the field with the flowers, right?
Right.
Because the first time, Goku talks about it briefly, but then they're actually she's collecting flowers for the wedding when this happens,
Mm-hmm.
and it is that joining together of the masculine and the feminine and the divinity that is Goku's future as well. it's on that
It's
way.
that too as well, yeah.
It works on multiple levels. Now, the present, seeing Bulma cooking with Krillin, right? And actually, Goku calls out to her, and she hears him, right?
Yeah.
And she's like, "What? Where's Goku? I
Well,
must
she
be
she
losing
turns
my
to Krillin because
mind."
Krillin's next to her, and she's like, "Stop calling out my name," and he's like, "It wasn't me."
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
she burns herself.
And to see that, right? It's what Goku's current I don't want to say struggle, but his current contention, right? With not contention. His current let's say Bulma's actually current contention with the mode that she's in right now and how she has to actually transcend this in order to go back home. Goku seeing this is kind of an almost an extension of setting the world back into order, and this has to also be done in the path, in the way of that. And we actually do get to that in the end of the next arc.
Mhm. It's it's interesting because later in the episode, or it's in the next episode, whenever he sees her again, it's from the same plot that it again calls to Bulma, right? I think it's significant that it does go straight to Bulma in a sense because Bulma's kind of been the protagonist of the story, right? Up until a certain point, and then there's a sort of handing off of that approach as we're getting into Goku really, and I had said this a couple episodes back that this feels like the time that Goku takes the agency and becomes the protagonist of the story, right?
Mhm.
And so I think that there's this connection that Goku has to Bulma with that adventurous exploring spirit, right? She was that one that called him to adventure originally.
Right, but now he needs to allow her to make her own decisions and set her back in her own
Right.
place. The other thing is, she's cooking in the episode, which is something that Bulma doesn't really do. We haven't really seen her do too
Well,
much
it's a
with
very
that.
maternal thing, right?
Yeah, and her interaction with Krillin too, she's able to kind of accept Krillin much more so than she accepts Oolong, for example.
Right, and there
And
he
so
is right at
we
her
see
side.
we see a bit of that integration happening with Bulma as well as her going out into the chaos, going out into the Blue Saga with the ocean and all of that, and her maturing more as a result
Well,
of
she
it.
did come back with her own gym,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Her own enlightenment
Mhm.
from there. So, just to mention why Bluma comes up. So then the last thing we see is a witch on a seeing orb and a masked man, which we'll get to. I don't even want to talk about them yet,
I do wanna talk about the centipede real quick.
but we will talk about the centipede. Yes.
Um, Symbolically, centipedes have kind of represented war and death. Um, it's interesting with this centipede, it's got a cross right in the middle of its head, right? And it springs up out of the water and it immediately binds Goku, so to speak. It wraps itself around him and pins him in place. And I think that my first thing that I would take away from it is that it is analogous to the way that your knowledge of the future can be crippling, or let's say your insight as to what your future could hold would actually be a crippling thing. And so it paralyzes you in that sense.
Huh. Interesting. Because I was gonna say about that the symbolism of the centipede being that of death and poison, because centipedes have poison too to their bite, right?
Right.
It's that idea that malice is the poison, right? Because he also sees Tao right after this or before this. Is it before this or after this? Right
Um,
after this, yeah. He sees his friends, and then he sees Tao, and he sees
and then he
Bora
sees the
and
vision of
Upa.
the future. Yeah, or I think he sees his friends, then he sees Bora and Upa, then he sees Tao, and then he sees into the future.
Yeah, and so that malice is pinning him in this one spot at Korin Tower, and this is how he has to proceed. There's
Well, it's like
no
a
other
knot that
place
he
for
has
him
to
to
untie
proceed.
for himself, right?
Right, exactly, and that's why he's bound up. Right, it's almost the is it a Gordian knot?
Well, it's to say that he's in limbo here, right? It's he's gazing into his future, but then this is sort of the center point of that where he's in limbo between what he's going to be able to do next, and this is what he needs to work out before he can decide what he does next.
He must gain that agency, right, that he can access because of his devotion towards the paternal spirit and his acceptance of the responsibility to redeem.
Right.
Oh no! What did I do? Oh boy, is it flagging?
But yeah, just as soon as he starts having the vision, it disappears, and he wonders what happened.
It was the three worlds, says the wise thing. Oh, hold on. Octo Daddy is what I just read. Previous episode. Here we go. So Goku searches up the stairs to find the source of the voice, gazing up at the floating spheres in the area. On the second level of the structure, he finds a room open on all sides with a four-handled pitcher being held by elephant statues. Then he finds the source, a cat holding a staff. Goku asks him where the hermit is, and he introduces himself as Korin, the cat hermit, or hermit cat, technically. Goku asks about the holy water, and Korin corrects him, calling it the super spirit water. He tells him that it's here, but also not here. Goku becomes annoyed with this contradiction, and Korin asks if he really wants it that badly. Goku says yes. Korin tells him that he doesn't get any. So already we have the next level of confrontation here with Korin. And to start, though, at the beginning, I do want to talk about the design of the pitcher. And it's being beheld by elephantine statues.
Mm-hmm. And then it has four handles as well.
Yes, it's like that 4-star ball, right? It's another explanation of that idea. Those axes coming together here, where Goku can drink that water, which we'll talk about more about the water, I think, next episode.
Right.
But for now, it's that, and the elephants themselves, right? Elephants, especially here in this pseudo Western, because if you think about, let's say, Journey to the West, the journey west there is to India, where elephantine very right. So we have the elephants who are they live a long time. They're strong, right? They protect their young in a more sophisticated way. Let's say more like humans do than a lot of other creatures. And so there's a nobility about elephants, especially in their symbolic use throughout mythology. And so them holding up this is that hoisting of nobility up towards something that is at the axis of being itself.
Well, elephants are also known to have a good memory, and they mourn their dead, right?
Yes.
So this is a symbol of that memory towards ancestry, that looking back and actually having that reverence towards the elder, like you had said, where there's that nobility and the long life. And so there's four of them coming together in a cross shape that creates a pitcher of water with four handles.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
it's
it,
in the center of a room that seems like it has sort of four directional poles going out of it, so to speak. And it's open to the sky on all sides, almost like a lookout, but not quite, because it has a roof to it.
yeah, there's still an upper limit to this place.
Right. This isn't open to the sky. It's still another. It's like a house.
Yes. And so yeah, and that's pretty much about our initial conceptions here of the sacred water.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do see Korin finally. And Korin, why is he a cat?
Well, cats are associated with luck, first of all, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not. I'm not entirely sure. I have some idea, but I haven't formulated it into something that's um, concise enough, I would say.
Well, I think we'll get into it this episode later on when Goku actually tries to get the water. But cat, there's something mystical about being able to catch a cat. Herding cats is an idiom, right?
Mm.
And let's say in Game of Thrones, Arya trying to catch a cat. That's something that is in the basis of that initiation step for her. And
Mm-hmm.
so Korin here being a cat, uh, first of all, he keeps his eyes closed, right? which is a first step in understanding the character because he, like Master Roshi, is blind
Right.
in a way. I mean, he doesn't have. I mean, Master Roshi obviously can see through his glasses, but we've talked about the symbolism behind those. But here, it's even beyond that. There's no vestment over Korin. His eyes are always shut.
That's just an aspect of his character.
Hmm. And so he relies on the, let's say, and we talked about this before, that basics of instinct, right? And he's very in tune with that animalistic nature, and that's why another reason cat is because it's Goku's mastery of those senses that he has ignored through the accepting of, let's say, a rational teaching in a more logos oriented Roshi training that he has gotten previously.
I like that you frame it that way because of the way that he integrates that as we go on and what he needs to learn about Korin as he's interacting with him here. There's so many things about his design that I like. So he also, the way his eyes look with them closed, he reminds me of the Buddha as well, right? He's got this jolly look on his face all the time, and he's got a good humor about him
Oh, he's
always,
definitely
right?
achieved nirvana up here, right?
Right. So he's a very Buddha like figure here, where he isn't God, right? But
But he
he
is
is a timeless
ascended.
spirit
Yeah.
that has ascended, that that has a dharma, you could say, that
Hmm.
he passes on. And so he has this good nature about him. You could call it being good natured, right? Where he doesn't take anything too seriously. And when Goku approaches him, right, he immediately is just joking. I think like the first thing that we hear him say leads into a joke, right? So he's got that aspect where he uh he seems pleased in a sense.
Well, and let's also make the transition clear because this is clearly Goku's new master for at least the next couple arcs. So we went from Turtle, right, which is that basic understanding of the dangers of the world, manifest then in the martial arts used by, or let's say the martial arts taught by Roshi, which is very practically oriented. We talked about tilling the soil, cultivation, right? We talked about delivering the milk, which is that respect and reverence for the
Well, the
traditional
turtle
way.
shell is that hoisting up of that base responsibility that you have as just
Exactly, yes.
a member of a society or of the world. Yeah,
As a response to the understanding that there is danger in the world, let's
right.
say. And so then we have the cat. And I'm kind of disappointed that Toriyama didn't ever give a symbol for Korin's teaching because I mean, Korin pretty much lasts until almost the last arc of Dragon Ball. He's gonna be the primary master until the last arc of Dragon Ball here in episode 60. Um,
Hmm.
and so I don't know. I would have liked him to have his own school, but I understand why he doesn't, and it's precisely because he is still that bestial cat master, which doesn't rely on that ordinate and
Yeah,
ordered
he doesn't
school
clothe
system.
himself,
Right.
right?
He doesn't clothe himself
So to be
because
like him is not to take on any sort of outward ego manifestation.
exactly. Although I think it would have been cool.
Still would have been cool.
So let's go ahead and continue. Unless no, we do have one.
Well,
We do have a couple more things. So, Goku asks about the holy water, and Korin corrects him, calling it the super spirit water in the translation, which is important because the the water is designed to strengthen one's spirit. Right? Holy holy water in and of itself is not one that strengthens the spirit, but is then blessed by it. So there's a distinction there, and I think that here Corin's calling that out.
one other thing about his design I want to point out is his staff, of course.
Oh, we didn't even talk about that. Yeah, go ahead.
Um, this is what Master Roshi has as well. He's got his staff.
Had
Well, had his
we
staff.
haven't have we seen it since Chi Chi cut it in half?
I guess not.
Had
Had his staff
yeah.
as a hermit, right? That's that hermetic
Mm-hmm.
implement, or you can associate it with like even the caduceus, right? It is that hermetic pillar that they carry with them as both a walking stick, but it's almost like a symbol of balance.
Well, I like the way too that it is a both a physical aid of balance and a spiritual aid of balance, right?
Yes.
And so, but I like how his looks like a hammer. Like it's literally a hammer with a spike on the other side.
Hmm.
Like it's great because
Well, it's got a blunt end and a sharp
Roshi's
end.
was all round, right?
Hmm.
Roshi's was all round, and here we're developing
It's an
Goku's.
articulation of a tool almost, right?
Well, I was gonna say we're developing Goku's ability to understand malice, and here we have a staff which is more malicious than Master Roshi's, integrated well within the design of Korin.
Right. Well, you can also say that Roshi's is an all-purpose sort of staff, right? A spherical sort of
Well, it
top
almost
you
looks
can
like a
use for
turtle shell.
right, and you can use it for kind of whatever
It
you could
almost
swing
looks like
a
a cat
circle
claw,
at,
right?
right?
It's almost a claw here.
But yeah, this is like a tooth or a claw
Hmm.
on top of this the staff or the pole that he
And it
carries.
has to be because this is how Goku's gonna be able to master it and adopt that original sin that will be redeemed going forward, right? That we were talking about a couple episodes ago.
Hmm.
So let's continue now, I think.
Well, initially Korin tells him that he doesn't get any water whenever
Oh,
he
that yeah.
asks Goku if he wants it that badly. So I want to sort of dial into what's going on with that a bit because of what Korin does here. We get a shot of him sort of reading him, right? It zooms in on his closed eyes as if we were going to see him inspecting him, but he's not, right? His eyes are still closed. And so he's reading him, and then he says, "You don't get any," right? But it's interesting how up front, whenever he asks Goku if he wants the water, he does evaluate him and then judges him not to get any, right? That first impression of him, right?
It's also to say that w- a, someone can follow the path all the way to the end and still not be able to reap the rewards if if they haven't done the right sacrifices to get there.
And if they don't know what the reward is.
And Goku hasn't made the right sacrifices yet of abandoning this childlike nature that he has been inhabiting this whole time.
Right.
Close that window, please. Careful, you're.
I got it.
Ooh. So yeah, Korin telling him he doesn't get any is because Goku has to mature to that level, and in the first place, he has to see if Goku's spirit is able to persevere in the face of adversity.
Hmm.
Imagine if Goku just gave up, then he wouldn't have done it. But that's not Goku, anyways.
Right. So this is also a first test, right? Which is
Yes.
to say, are you willing to commit yourself to getting it if you're told
Despite
no?
despite the authority telling you no,
Right.
right? Despite, and this is kind of the same thing that we see with Luke and Yoda. Think about that, right? That
Hmm.
actually came out before this, I believe. Yes. And so, what does Yoda say when Luke first goes to get the training from him? He's too old. He's too old to begin the training. He's too reckless to do the training. All these reasons.
Well, it's funny how he acts it out in Fight Club. Tyler Durden comes out onto the porch and he keeps telling everyone, "Too fat. You're too this, you're too that."
Yeah.
And he's putting forth that test because he sees himself as that sort of spiritual test for people, right?
Yeah, it's actually. See, I think
Myth and movies.
well, it's a pseudo thing because Tyler Durden is
No,
clearly not that.
he's not it, but he
But
thinks he is,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
And that's why he does it. Is because that's he sees that is a rite of passage into what he would consider to be enlightenment, right?
Well, and also the outright refusal of the spirit of
But
acceptance
it's
that
also shedding the vestments, right? Like in Fight Club, where it's like you burn your apartment, you get rid of all that. So he's trying to do that, but it's towards destruction.
right. No, I don't think yeah, it's not the same as
It's
Fight Club.
it's not the yeah, it's not the
But
same as
I know
Corin,
what you
but
mean. Yeah,
that
he's
whole
trying to do that. But exactly that the ancestral and the spiritual father initially will reject the heroic cause
mhm.
is like it's always been instantiated in that way that those obstacles are there to improve the hero's character. And I think it's part of the adage about the preparation of the journey that leads to the ultimate let's say, sublimation. So, I think we'll go ahead and continue.
Swear. Oleg was at the door. He's like, meow. And then he ran off.
So then we go back to the desert town. Tao Pai Pai walks in the streets. He's recognized by a pair of men with a sniper rifle. He attempts to shoot the sniper, that is, attempts to shoot Tao from behind, but he casually deflects the bullet with his sandal, sending it through his and his friend's hats. He arrives at a high-class hotel and is greeted but with reverence by the staff. He asks for a raw egg and heads up to the room where he draws a bath and uses his will to heat it to a boil. He then bathes in the boiling water and with the egg and eats it once it's been hard boiled. So we see this is definitely a point towards the manifestation of Tao here, right? That malice, that hot malice, right, is able here to, let's say metaphorically, right, bring this unknown to a boil, right? The water itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so the water being that unconscious, chaotic state, bringing that to a boil, right, is what malice can do. And it brings chaos forthfront. And that's another thing. What happens in Spider-Man, let's say, is that the malice of Goblin is what brings all of that chaos that happens in that second act. He
Mm-hmm.
brings the water to a boil.
Inevitably. I also want to point out the efficiency of Tao that we see continuing with this character, right? Where he doesn't make a show out of defending his own life. He casually just flips his sandal up as he's walking and never breaks stride, right? It's the imagine this is the least amount of energy that he could put into an action
Mm-hmm.
to stop it from being able
It's
to
also
hit
to
him.
say, I think the scene of the sniper itself is to say that Tao is constantly living in a state where he's dealing with death. And
True.
it's a almost a negative feedback loop anyways to instantiate the spirit of Tao with all these people are trying to kill Tao.
Mm-hmm. And then the efficiency continues. He comes here into his room and he uses his own bathwater to boil an egg and eats the bare minimum that he needs, right? So we're seeing this aspect of Tao, like I had mentioned before, where there is nothing extra about himself. He expresses himself completely simply, right?
And this is also how he integrates that chaos into, because that we talked about the water as the unconscious chaos. It's how he integrates this that allows him to be as powerful as he is, because he, as that spirit of malice, revels in that boiling chaos.
Well, this is just normal for him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's the idea that it's like he's the king of the jungle here, right?
That's why he has that
That's why he's
lion
got the lion.
spout.
Because he lives in the royal, right? He is, and that's that nature is red in tooth and claw. Like that's why he takes the egg into the bath with him and with his own nature boils it and makes it into
Yes.
something that he can consume to nourish himself as well. Because he is a higher level instantiation of that idea, right? He's almost like a spirit or a specter of death.
Sorry, it's this is kind of freaking out. Yeah, and I mean that's one of the reasons why he's independent as well from Red, and like we saw last episode, him telling Red that like he doesn't control him, for example.
Right.
Hold on, I have a skipped frames, 52% over the last 2 minutes. I
Okay.
wonder what it's gonna look like.
Hopefully our audio isn't skipped.
We'll see. It was freaking out. So, back at the base of the tower, Upa gazes up and wonders if Goku's been able to get to the sacred water. After all, I'm pretty sure Upa would have known if he fell off the tower.
There's only one way down.
There's only one way down. At the top, Korin asks Goku if he wouldn't prefer a more peaceful life, that he doesn't have to do this,
Right.
that he as an individual has the autonomy to decide not to be the hero. Goku begins to explain why he needs to get the water, and Korin tells him to be silent. He reads his mind and recites his intentions back to him. Goku is shocked, and Korin responds by telling him that he wouldn't be a real hermit if he couldn't read his mind. And this is to say that with the experience and wisdom of the spirit of the ancestral father, the judgment of one's spirit is manifest to them. Just as
Mhm.
Pinocchio, his, let's say, donkey ears and donkey tails immediately pointed out by his father when he goes into the belly of the whale, here the spirit of Goku is immediately made bare to the spiritual father, and that's because the experience and the reverence for the ancestry, the hermit lifestyle, which is devoted to the seeking of truth, all of those things are made manifest in the ability to read people's characters and see the patterns that emerge from seeing individuals instantiated throughout time.
I like that you put it that way because the most literal translation of what he says here, it actually uses the term for heart thinking rather than just thinking for reading Goku's mind, and it's more to insinuate that he can read his intentions.
Hmm.
And so that really ties into what you're saying there, where he can read Goku bare, not just what he's thinking, but his reason for being here.
Hmm.
And of course, here's the thing: when he first judges Goku in the last set of frames we saw him, it zooms in on his eyes and he judges on him, judges all over him. He
Judges all over
he
him.
judges that Goku's intent for being here is to literally drink a magic potion and make himself stronger. And he says, "No water for you," because
Yes.
he's judging his intentions, not just his thoughts.
Hmm. Exactly. And another thing that I wanted to bring up is like we were watching from The Wizard of Oz the other day, right? That's that same uh spirit made bare towards that paternal, and that's really what the
Hmm.
wizard is in the end of that movie. Is it's after Dorothy and them have gone through the quest, they've gained the acceptance of the spiritual father, then they're able to receive the boons and go back home.
Right.
But in that instance, when they're there for the first time before they've gained that respect of the ancestral, uh, he just points out all their flaws and just like calls them out, right? And
Hmm.
their spirit is made bare to them.
So
And
what I love though, right, is that symbolically what he's saying is I wouldn't be a hermit, the wielder of the staff, if I couldn't judge your
yes, and
orientation.
that was another thing, yeah. And that's exactly it, and that's why he's basically spelling it out that
Yeah,
he is what he is because he can do what he does.
that art thou.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
This yeah, that's from Alan Watts.
yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's what we just said, that he wouldn't be a real hermit if he couldn't read him. As in Korin, states that Goku has no ill intention, and Goku rushes to drink the water at the center of the room. What will happen? Goku's oriented towards it.
He wants to go drink the
He
water.
wants to drink the water. He wants sublimate the unknown into his own being to make himself stronger. But this isn't quite the test that he thinks it is.
Now, imagine that you're a hermit and you have a home here and you never get any visitors. And somebody comes in and rushes up to you and says, "I heard you've got something really cool here. I'm here to get it." And then immediately rushes over to get it.
Yeah, I
It's not
mean,
exactly respectful to you, right?
right. That's true.
And there's not a reverence initially here that's paid to Korin.
Even with no ill intention, that's the thing. It's
Yeah,
not enough to be harmless.
you need to be reverent.
Right. One needs to be reverent, and Goku needs to learn the difference between having a sheathed weapon and an unsheathed weapon.
Hmm.
And that's what Tao is, right? Is an unsheathed weapon wielded by the will of Commander Red.
Exactly. Yeah. But I just wanted to point that out about that interaction that he has with Korin initially and why it could seem maybe a little bit absurd, where he's just like, "Oh, well, it's here and it's not. Well, you don't get any." And then he lets him try to get it. But he obviously wants him to get it. I think the original interaction is that he judges his intentions here, which is to get something and not to do it for the reason that he needs to be here in the first place.
And I mean, after discussing with him, it kind of changes. After Korin
Right.
reads him, it changes his initial interpretation.
And
But
then he has to articulate
that's
it
also
further,
to
right?
say that the scrutiny of the spiritual father is a rather hot has to be at a rather high level because so many people fail to live up to the respect it is actually earned or let's say worthy of.
Right.
So then, when Goku reaches for the water, Korin intervenes at the last moment, knocking Goku aside. Shocked, Goku accuses Korin of being a liar. Korin expands that Goku can drink the water if he can get it from him. Goku attempts to distract Korin by pointing and shouting, but Korin simply blocks him with a staff, scorning him for trying that against someone who could read his mind.
Mhm.
Korin hooks the handle to the pitcher to the end of his staff, at the tooth, right?
Mhm.
And begins taunting Goku to try to take it from him. Try as he might, Goku can't seem to catch Korin. Korin tells them he isn't reading his opponent's moves at all. And so this is that wisdom of being able to tell the difference between a malicious and an unmalicious spirit. What is the main mistake that Goku made a couple episodes ago was not understanding that Tao's maliciousness was such that it shouldn't have been Bora fighting him in the first place. That Goku shouldn't have allowed that to even happen. But because he thought at the time that it was a game and that things are all games and that he just needs to be the best at games, then it would be
Well,
fine.
also, if what he sees in other people is that they are just like him, then he should see those people as always just wanting to get better by the conflicts that they get into and that they accept all conflicts voluntarily. Whereas there's a sense that you shouldn't project that about yourself onto other people because that shirks a responsibility.
And his responsibility being the whole reason why Tao's there in the first place, right? He
Exactly.
has brought the malice to this land. The heroes inadvertently brought malice to Korin, the sacred land.
Exactly. And that's the price that he pays. Ultimately is the that knowledge that comes with seeing not he learns several things at the same time, and that's why we see several things taken from him at the same time when Bora is killed, right? And that's why he's
Yes.
separated from his power pole and his outer garments of Roshi as well. And it's like that separate. It's like you're not gonna live forever, right? And your master is not gonna live forever because his master never lived forever or didn't live forever, right? And it's like a
And
guillotine coming down,
that
right?
one must honor the cycle, and not only one must honor the cycle, but things aren't always games.
Right.
Just because that the hierarchy of games and being good across games is beneficial to one's being doesn't mean that every problem can be solved by playing out a game. And like we said last episode, lots of the Jenkin, I think he used it a couple more times. I think against like maybe Pilaf,
It's
but
it's contextually sound, I'm sure,
for
though.
the most part, it's pretty much gone. I think he tries to use it against Piccolo, but for the most part, he pretty much realizes that
Does he beat
it's an
anyone with it after this?
no.
I don't
He
I
doesn't
don't
beat any. He
imagine.
doesn't beat anyone with it after
Because
this.
he
That's for
beat
sure.
Murasaki with it, right?
Yeah, he beat Murasaki with it. Right. He even beat Blue with it because Blue was playing a game.
Mhm. Well, Blue was definitely playing a game. He didn't engage with Robot, right?
Yeah, and so, but Tao's not playing a game, and so that's where we're at.
Mhm.
So, I do want to mention that Goku accusing Korin of being a liar, right? It's the forthright nature of Goku that is being called forth at this point because Korin never said whether or not he would stop Goku from getting it, and that's kind of part of that in instinctual nature. You have to intuit people's intentions even if they don't say their intentions.
Right,
And
and
it's
he
another
says it
level
is
of
and it isn't, right?
yeah, there's another level to not only Korin's words and actions, right? But this lesson that he's trying to teach Goku. And it's not just it makes him faster. That's what Korin does.
We'll get into that.
Well, he will be faster. So, I also like that Korin hooks the pitcher of the pitcher with the handle of his staff at the top there. It's not even the handle, it's like the headpiece. It's like the tooth that we were talking about
Hmm.
that's made there that can Goku
Grasp it.
can Goku grasp the spirit of another person?
Hmm. Instead of projecting his intentions onto other people's intentions, or to say, what I would do is what this person would do, or how I
And
would
that's
feel about
exactly
this
what
is how they
Goku
do feel
tries
about it.
at the very beginning, is that he tries to point and, like, yell that there's something behind him, and he immediately is rebuffed, and Korin basically tells him that that's not gonna work.
Right. This lesson of, I like that that's the first thing he tries and that it fails because this is what he's learning is that orientation. And so he tries to trick, he essentially, by pointing, tries to trick Corin with his orientation or to make him focus his
Because
attention improperly.
because what happened in the Blue Saga? Bulma did that to Goku, and Goku fell for it. So it is
He
another
failed.
exact
Yeah.
example of what you're saying, is that projection of his spirit on the other. Because
And
his spirit is strong. If this spirit is strong, it must be similar to my spirit, but that's not
his definition of
what
what
is
it would mean
happening.
to be strong needs to be changed.
Expanded.
And that's
Yeah.
why he's here with the hermit, right?
And that's the
And
incorporation of this more chaos.
and so of course he says, now the literal translation says, why would you try that on someone who can read your mind? But thinking of it in that context of him reading his intentions beyond just what he's thinking, but what he's intending to do. If Goku intends to trick Korin, it will not work because Korin knows his intentions. In that
Exactly.
sense, if he tries to direct his attention to the wrong thing, right? His intention to do that is clear to Korin.
And it's
So
to say
whatever Goku
too,
points at is immaterial to Korin because he knows what he needs to look at.
yes, he doesn't look at anything because he doesn't look.
Right, he looks inward.
Exactly. Eyes on the inside. Um, the last thing I would say is that it's made clear that Goku has to do this fairly. He has to adopt the spirit of another in order to be able to gain this wisdom.
It does take Goku a minute to figure that out too.
Well, we'll get to
Hmm.
it. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves because we have one last part. Ooh, yeah, here we go. So a storm gathers. A storm. What could that be? Gathers on Korin's tower. Meanwhile, on Roshi's island, we see that Roshi is standing out in the rain. He says he wonders if something is happening. On the tower, Goku asks Korin if anyone has ever climbed it before. Korin tells Goku that it has only happened once, 300 years ago. Goku is shocked, and he asks Korin how old he is. Korin states that he's just over 800 years old, and that Goku should show some respect. Korin goes on to tell that the person who made it before him was the person that Goku calls Master, Roshi. On the island, we see Roshi focusing and becoming embiggened. Here comes the beginning. A lightning bolt strikes his upraised arm, and he begins to glow with energy before pointing an energy beam to part the sea. Goku states that Korin must really be an important person. And this is the first time we've seen Goku start to give the reverence that is due to the knowledge he is trying to gain.
So the first night he's here, he gains the wisdom that this is an ancestral spirit that he has to be able to show reverence to in the same way that he had to learn the reverence for Roshi.
Yes. And the storm itself is in both places. Even
Right.
though they're on opposite parts of the world, there's storms at both places because
Hmm.
it's that, yeah,
It's almost
exactly.
like Roshi's island is inside Goku's mind or
It's
something.
that synchronicity, right? And that storm is that contention between the unknown and the settling out into order that will happen when the storm breaks. And so right now Goku is in the unknown, right? He is in a place that he is unable to master. And so now he's got to take steps to master it as we go forward into this. And a couple other things. Roshi climbing the tower makes sense. Roshi seems to have gained that instinctual reading of people. After all, he was able to trick. In fact, the whole reason he won the Budokai was he was able to read the intention that Goku had and use it against him. and use his own strength to put an end to the match.
Oh yeah, not only that, but his whole lightning surprise technique, what I had said before, and it
Yes.
being that dharma that he's gained from a Buddha-like figure, right?
Yeah, and that we can imagine that comes from
But
this.
what does he tell him when he uses that technique on him? He says, "Say uncle."
Yeah.
Specifically, he says, "Say uncle." Pay reverence, right,
Hmm.
to a spiritual father figure, because traditionally
And
the
this is it.
sister's brother
Yeah.
takes on the second rank
Well, and
of
that's what we
paternal
were
order, right?
saying about the lightning surprise is that it was that Goku had to realize the subjugation of himself to an higher order. And here
Hmm.
he's realizing the same thing. And
And the
so,
lightning is coming down
yes,
at the
and
same
we can
time.
assume now that the lightning surprise attack will no longer work on Goku once he's learned the training from Korin.
Right. And that's
It's
also to
safe
say
to
that he's
assume that.
integrating the thing that knocked him unconscious originally that Robot did to him down in the water,
Mhm.
right? That
Which was another
enlightenment.
lightning thing, yeah,
And
exactly.
so, but also what Roshi does with the lightning, I think is significant as well.
Is that he creates a light in the chaos, right?
He creates a beam
Mhm.
focused at a single point.
Well, he points, yeah, he points
Yeah.
like the Dodon ray almost.
Yes, he
Mhm.
directs it, right?
Although it is a different color, right?
It's not like the
It's not
Dodon
aimed
ray.
in malice.
This
Yeah.
is aimed, it's powered by the heavens, right? He
Yeah.
takes the enlightenment from the heavens and then he points it, right? So this is a good one. So it's blue.
Yes.
Ooh.
Whoa.
But this is part of that lesson that Goku's now having to learn is where to orient that focus and where to orient that reverence.
And that heavenly spirit aids the, let's say, the benign spirits of, let's say, the hero, the masculine, the ancestral father, the societal father. All of those things are bolstered by the chaotic nature of Mother Nature herself, in the sense that that lightning bolt, right? That enlightenment which comes from interacting in chaos is manifest through Roshi's ability to use it the way he does.
Right. And I would say that's possibly just the tip of the iceberg of what I think that this could mean. So I'm excited to expand on it as Goku learns his lesson in the next episode.
Mm, mm. Okay. Well, I think that brings us pretty neatly to the end here.
I think so.
How long have we been going? I wonder. Oh, yep. Time to start wrapping up. All right. Well, I think anything else you have?
No. I think that's going to be it for this episode.
Okay. Well, if you liked what you heard, please give us a subscribe. We upload on Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday on YouTube, and Monday, Wednesday, Friday on Rumble, sometimes on BitChute if I can ever get it to work, but it always logs me out every time and it kind of pisses me off. Anyways, give us a subscribe on Rumble. Give us a subscribe. If you liked what you heard, give us a like. Comment if you disagreed with anything. We love to hear what you guys have to say. Other than that, I think I'm your host on the Left Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
We hope you guys have a good night.